Hello again, fellow Mystery Files. Today I bring you something a little different and something unusual, at least for me, a review of a recent mystery novel published about 2 weeks ago from the time I'm recording this. It's called The Busybody by Kemper Donovan, who is the host of the All About Agatha podcast, along with his late co-host Catherine Brobeck. And as I've referenced a number of times before, I am not the biggest fan of current mystery novels. I don't find them that interesting, intriguing, entertaining, thought provoking. There are exceptions, of course, and I thought if any author is going to be an exception to that, it's going to be Kemper Donovan. I'm a big fan of his podcast for many years now, so I know he understands fully Agatha Christie and all of her nuances. I'm sure many of you listen to his podcast, and he and his co host understand what makes Agatha Christie Agatha Christie. A lot of present day books are labeled things like an Agatha Christie esque mystery, which is a label that to me has just lost all meaning because it's used so often it lacks any context for me. Whenever I see that, I just cringe. Just because something is a mystery novel doesn't make it Christie esque. So I thought it'd be a fun exercise here to read The Busybody, give my thoughts on it, and put it through the Christie metric I developed to see how it stands up. Now, unlike when I normally review books, I will not be summarizing anything here. This book just came out, so no summary, no spoilers whatsoever. You don't have to worry about that. And full disclosure here, in the interest of transparency, I've talked to the author many times before via email where we've discussed Christie and other mystery novels. We're acquaintances, I suppose. I just want to be transparent here, but it doesn't affect my opinion of his book or my assessment of it. And if you follow this channel for a while now, you know I'm not one to dish out insincere praise. Now, before I begin, make sure you like and subscribe to keep up to date with my channel, and make sure you vote in the currently ongoing poll to select which author I will rank next. It's under the Community tab and will remain open until I finish reviewing the Albert Campion books by Marjorie Allingham and have to move on to another detective. And I'll begin with, as always, with praise. I'll just come out and say it here. I enjoyed this book a lot. I have a lot more praise than criticism here. Most importantly, The Busybody is a traditional murder mystery. It has a build up to the murder, a murder victim, an investigation, clues to help the reader and characters solve the murder, and a proper solution, review, and summation gathering. So many present day mysteries lack this. The books act as if they contain those things, but they don't. The Busybody actually is a proper, well crafted murder mystery, which immediately places it above average in terms of the modern landscape, in my opinion. But even beyond that, I felt the mechanics of the murder plot are very good. There are a lot of good obfuscation tricks going on and a number of good red herrings. To me, a good red herring is one incorporated into the story and not a sort of like obvious side plot. There are no true side plots here, which is always a plus. I mean, there's some minor ones, but that's neither here nor there. I really appreciated how much effort went into the murder plot and the characters here. There is no extraneous material at all in this book, which is a main problem I have with a lot of current day authors. They often forget the book is a mystery novel and go on tangents about like what characters are doing that don't add even to like the characterization, but the busybody sticks with the mystery the entire time outside of like character intros and background and that sort of thing. I really appreciate the homages to Christie and the Golden Age. I thought they were very well done with this book, taking some of Christie's tricks and bringing them into the current day. The author doesn't simply lift the tricks, but amends them to fit with present times. I think more than anything, this book really demonstrates that updated technology and advanced science are no deterrents to a mystery novel. There's this misconception out there because of like advanced technology and new science that rendered a lot of these golden era twists obsolete, that a traditional mystery like that with good twists can't be done. But The Busybody smashes that misconception. This book has multiple twists, often reminiscent of some of Christie's greatest twists, and they work in the modern day. So I think the fact that a lot of mystery writers today don't go this route is really unfounded, and to me, The Busybody lowers my opinion of those books already because it shows these twists can be done. There's no excuse for lazy writing. And one of the tributes paid to Christie that I can talk about without spoiling is the narrator. We have a first person narrator who is not the main character or the main sleuthing force. This is something common in the Golden Age where the narrator would be the sidekick. We see this with like Watson and Sherlock Holmes and Captain Hastings and Poirot and like the fictional SS Van Dyne and Philo Vance, the narrator being not too much help, which I also find humorous and appropriate for the Golden Age. And speaking of characters, I found this book to have good, nuanced characters. Now, I would quibble with how they develop, but that's really more of a personal choice than anything. The main character is Dorothy Gibson, who is very clearly a Hillary Clinton stand in. She recently lost a presidential election, only her role in that election is different from Clinton's in 2016. Gibson was essentially the third party spoiler. I think the author captures the nuances of like this Hillary Clinton type character without getting overly political. This is not a political mystery. I also think he does a good job of steering clear of politics despite using a politician as his main character. In this type of story, you want the broadest possible audience, so you don't want to alienate anyone on either side of the aisle. This is not a book meant to like rile up political anger and or joy. I like how our unnamed narrator is a ghost writer, and Donovan treats her. I'm going to assume the narrator is a woman, although we don't actually know that. In a similar fashion, we learn almost nothing about this ghostwriter, just like we do with real life ghostwriters. There's no name given, no gender even. I found this very creative. Most importantly, this book is that it kept my attention the entire time. I was never bored. I can't stress enough how important this is, as I find myself just like looking off when I'm trying to read like most contemporary mystery novels, and that was not the case here. Now, this book is not perfect. No book is. I could go on and on about everything I hate about And Then There Were None, and I think it's the greatest novel of all time. I recommend The Busybody to everyone. However, if you take my recommendation and don't enjoy the book, I suspect the reason will be the narrator. My preference for a narrator is third person, specifically third person omniscient, because I think it's a very solid and even way to tell a story. I think first person narrators can be wonderful, but especially in recent books, there's been issue for me of first person narrators lacking authority and trying to be too chummy with the reader. I found the ghostwriter narrator to be extremely casual and trying too hard to be relatable. I also think there's a tendency that many authors think their first person narrator has to be relatable. I personally don't think that's the case. The ghostwriter in this novel talks way too much and tries way too hard to be friendly that they come off as off putting at times. I mean, there are many parenthetical asides where the narrator gives commentary on pop culture items and other things that just don't matter, including at least two times using a hashtag. It's way too much. I think there are instances where it happened like three or more times per paragraph. I also didn't find a lot of the jokes the narrator made to be funny. Some of them did land and land pretty well, but many times I just moved on quickly away from it. It almost comes across as rambling at times, and what this does doesn't make the narrator funny or relatable, but it detracts from their authoritative voice of the novel. It's not that you can't have a humorous narrator or a snarky narrator, but he or she has to maintain the authority of a storyteller. And since this narrator is a ghost writer who pens memoirs for famous people, I did expect the authority to be there and be there very strong, and I didn't find that. Other than the narrator, my critiques of this book are more of like personal choices. Like I said, the book is well conceived and well executed. I did find some of the supporting characters had like unusual and unrealistic dialogue that I just didn't feel came across as genuine, but it wasn't pervasive nor a big deal. In fact, much of my other criticisms are like just so small, like they don't come close to outweighing the positives I have for this book. The solution I found a bit overmuch. Like I said earlier, there are great twists here, but it's almost too many. I think dispensing with one or two to fine tune the others and let the others shine would have been ideal. In this reveal, we just get like a real almost laundry list of just twist after twist after twist. It's really hard to wrap your head around and appreciate just how good some of those twists were. and I found there were a few of the murder mechanics and parts of the solution to be convenient, but they never really fall into like the coincidence category. The plot solution all worked, and I was convinced. Now, I'll say I was only convinced about like 85 to 90% there. There are other like 10 to 15% left for me, a little doubtful this would actually happen. And one of my hobbies outside of detective fiction is elections and campaigns. I did find some of the election commentary to be a little inaccurate, but at the same time, this is a fictional universe with a fictional election and fictional characters. And as readers, we should not assume the content in a book is the author's own commentary, but I still find it a little incredible that an independent candidate was able to win at least one state and earn a third of the popular vote. Now, I don't think that really rings true, but again, this is not a real world here. This is not something I would hold against the book. If I were grading on a point scale, I wouldn't deduct any points for this, but I did feel it was something worth mentioning here anyway. Now, let's put the busybody through my Christie metric. Check out my previous video, which I'll link here if you need a refresher. And remember, the Christie metric only measures if a book contains Christie elements. It is not a judge of how well or how poor a book does with those metrics. I think the Christie metric is very useful when assessing contemporary mystery novels because so many are said to be Christie-like, and they are simply not. So, how did the busybody do? It scored 25 points out of 35, which I would consider fair to say is Christie-like. I think a score of 25 to 35 is Christie-esque. Now, the Busybody lost all of its points, however, in two of the biggest categories, two of the most important categories. It lost 5 points for not being economically written. It is an easy, brisk read. This is not like a Dorothy Sayers college textbook like novel, but it did lack that succinct Christie style of writing, so I couldn't give it points there, especially considering with how many asides the narrator goes on and how a little rambling they get. And the other category it didn't meet was the conventional murder. And I did debate over this one. There are aspects of the plot that do meet the standard, particularly in the motive and the way the people act. But ultimately, I felt the actual mechanics were too complicated to meet the simple murder standard Christie set. It does feel more like a murder Christie would write in like a bigger concept novel rather than a typical Christie novel. And again, I loved the murder plot in The Busybody. It's just not quite typical of Christie, in my opinion. And The Busybody earned points in all of the other categories. I do all or nothing for this, remember. I don't want to get into it too much because I want to avoid spoilers, but The Busybody has a Christie-esque obfuscation technique, focuses on human nature and psychology, exists in a specific time and place, has an in your face solution, has a close circle of suspects, a dark plot hidden by lighter elements, a proper summation gathering, and is witty. And I debated over the close circle of suspects. My first thought was that this book doesn't meet the standard for a close circle of suspects, as there's no sense of seclusion that I find necessary for that. But the more I thought about it, the point is established in the book that there are limited suspects via clues and different techniques to like ensure this. So I thought it was fair to give it points. A score of 25 is respectable. That's the same score Appointment with Death and The Moving Finger received, although they lost points in different categories. And that's it for this video. I hope you all check out The Busybody. In the future, I'm semi open to doing this kind of review for other new novels. We'll see. I'm open to recommendations. I'm not sure how likely or how often I would do something like this, but we'll see. No promises. Next week is Valentine's Day, so I have a Valentine's Day double feature planned. On Monday, I will review Death on the Nile, which won the poll. And on Wednesday, which is Valentine's Day, I will review the appropriately themed The Poison Chocolates case, which placed second. Remember, the poll that picks my next author is still open and will be open for a little bit longer, so make sure you vote if you haven't already. Until next time, Mystery Files.